Watchdog News, this is Jared Campbell. So I have a breaking global report. NATO's exclusion, Russia's military gains, China's new peace role, and the economic fallout of war. The global order in flux. As 2025 unfolds, the global balance of power is undergoing a seismic shift driven by military escalations, economic conflicts, and diplomatic maneuvers. Russia has officially excluded NATO and the EU from any peacekeeping role in Ukraine, favoring China as a mediator. Moscow's push into the Kursk region threatens to encircle thousands of Ukrainian troops, while Washington freezes military aid and intelligence sharing to Kyiv. NATO has increased arms imports by 105% over the last 5 years, with Europe scrambling to rearm amid Trump's disengagement from Ukraine. China has launched a major counterstrike in its trade war with the U.S., imposing $22 billion in retaliatory tariffs on American agriculture exports. Trump has refused to rule out a U.S. recession, fueling fears that his economic policies could destabilize global markets. Syria is experiencing its deadliest violence since the fall of Assad, with over 1,500 deaths and violent clashes, and the death toll is rising, raising fears of another civil war in Syria. France is also pushing to suspend Turkey's EU accession negotiations, citing Erdogan's close ties with Russia and aggressive military actions against the Kurds. Russia has also expelled 2 British diplomats, accusing them of espionage, escalating the West-Russia intelligence war. The EU and NATO are debating a coalition of the willing peacekeeping force in Ukraine, while China signals it may deploy peacekeepers to replace Western forces. Russia's hardline stance, no NATO, only China. The Kremlin has drawn a clear red line. NATO and the EU will not be allowed to participate in any post-war peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. Instead, Russia has openly welcomed China's growing diplomatic role, stating that Beijing's proposals are the only constructive peace initiatives it recognizes. Why is this a major shift? Moscow sees NATO peacekeepers as a direct threat, warning that their presence could trigger an uncontrollable escalation. China's involvement signals the expansion of Beijing's influence in European security affairs, a domain traditionally dominated by the US and NATO forces. By sidelining NATO and inviting China, Russia is fundamentally reshaping how conflicts in Europe are mediated and also resolved. This exclusion has left NATO and the EU scrambling for alternative strategies. NATO's strategic response, alternate peacekeeping plans. While NATO will not send troops into Ukraine, European leaders are actively debating alternate stabilization plans. A coalition of the willing peacekeeping force led by Britain and France, involving select European nations. A potential UN-backed mission using neutral nations like India, Brazil, or Turkey to monitor a ceasefire. A shadow U.S. security guarantee where NATO officially stays out but provides covert intelligence and logistical support to Ukraine. Europe's growing worries. France has proposed suspending Turkey's EU accession talks, warning that the aggressive foreign policy and realignment with Russia make it unreliable partner. European leaders fear a U.S.-Russia-China peace deal could leave the EU powerless in shaping Ukraine's future. Germany and Poland are pushing for an independent European defense structure in case Trump further disengages from NATO's security commitments. The risk. If NATO is cut out completely, Russia and China will dictate Ukraine's post-war settlement without Western influence. China's role in Ukraine. Diplomatic power play. So China's role in Ukraine, is it a diplomatic power play or a Trojan horse? Beijing is positioning itself as a global peace broker, offering to deploy peacekeepers in Ukraine under a neutral mandate. Why does this matter? If China sends peacekeepers, it'll be the first time Beijing plays a major role in European security affairs. Russia trusts China far more than it does NATO, making a Chinese-led mission the only peacekeeping option Moscow is likely to accept. For China, mediating the war could enhance its global standing and allow it to deepen its influence in Europe. Potential outcomes. China could serve as a stabilizing force, preventing Russia excesses while offering Ukraine a face-saving ceasefire. However, a Chinese-led peacekeeping mission might freeze the conflict, cementing Russian territorial gains. If China replaces NATO as a peacekeeper, it may weaken U.S. influence in Eastern Europe while strengthening China's ties to Russia and the global South. This could mark the beginning of a geopolitical realignment where China, not the West, mediates global conflicts. Let's talk about the battle for the Kursk region in Russia. A turning point in the war. The situation on the ground. Russian forces have launched a multi-front offensive, encircling thousands of Ukrainian troops in Kursk. Ukraine faces a brutal choice: risk mass casualties or attempt a strategic retreat under heavy fire. Lack of U.S. intelligence support has weakened Ukraine's battlefield awareness, making counterattacks difficult. Why does this matter? If Kursk falls, Russia will solidify its control over northeastern Ukraine, further weakening Kyiv's leverage in peace talks. This offensive could force Ukraine into accepting a ceasefire on Russia's terms, with China acting as a key mediator. Let's talk about Trump's freeze on U.S. military aid has directly contributed to Ukraine's worsening position, causing panic among European allies. This battle could determine whether Ukraine still has a path to victory or if it must settle for an unfavorable peace. The trade war escalates. China's retaliation against the U.S. So Beijing's counterstrike, talk about that in the opening. China has imposed $22 billion in tariffs on American agriculture products, targeting soybeans, corn, and poultry. This move directly hits Trump's rural voter base, increasing domestic political pressure on the White House. Beijing has also suspended imports of U.S. lumber, escalating economic tensions further. The bigger picture: if the trade war intensifies, it could trigger global supply chain disruptions and a U.S. economic downturn. China's retaliation suggests it is willing to absorb short-term economic pain to weaken Trump politically. Wow. Europe and other major economies are caught in the middle, forced to navigate between two warring superpowers. With both economic and military conflicts escalating, global stability hangs in the balance. Trump's recession warning: U.S. and global markets on edge. Trump has refused to rule out a U.S. recession, citing economic uncertainties. Wall Street analysts warn that prolonged trade tensions and tariff escalations could push the U.S. into a downturn. A weaker U.S. economy could reduce Washington's ability to fund military operations and foreign aid, further weakening NATO's position. The world economy is at a critical inflection point. If the U.S. slows down, global markets and global security will feel the shockwaves. The growing intelligence war. Russia expels British diplomats. Russia has expelled 2 British diplomats, accusing them of espionage, intensifying the intelligence battle between Russia and NATO. This follows a pattern of Russian intelligence activity targeting Western governments with suspected cyber attacks on U.S. and the European infrastructure. As tensions rise, intelligence agencies on both sides are escalating their covert operations, bringing Cold War-style shadow conflicts back to the forefront. As I conclude my report this evening, so I know it's a very quick one. So here's my conclusion. The world on the brink of a new order. Russia is making battlefield gains, while pushing NATO out of peace negotiations. Ukraine's future hangs on high stakes. Diplomacy in Saudi Arabia, with China playing an increasingly dominant role. China's economic countermeasures signal an intensification of the U.S.-China rivalry, with major consequences for global markets. Europe is rearming rapidly, preparing for a long-term confrontation with Russia. Trump's economic policies could trigger recession fears, further destabilizing the global landscape. Are we entering a new era of global realignment? The coming weeks will determine whether the world moves towards peace or further escalation. This is Watchdog News in association with Watchdog Ministries. This is Jared Campbell. Thank you all again for your love and support. Please like, share, subscribe, follow. Right? Stay in tune for further updates. Always stay watchful, stay vigilant, and always be prepared for what's coming. These are what my reports are all about. They're quick, they're to the point, they're with good details, backed up by good sources, giving you the truth and only the truth in a very timely manner. Because truth is important and real news is important. So without all that, thank you all again for following. Thank you again for your love and support. I'm Jared Campbell. This is Watchdog News with Watchdog Ministries. We love you all so much. Have a very, very blessed evening. The world is picking up. I will stay on this for all of you and will continue to update you all as things come in. I stay patient with my reporting. I don't try to be first one, but I always stay patient because I like things to come together. Thank you all again. Watchdog News, it's Jared Campbell. I'm signing off for the evening. You all have a blessed evening.